Who is our host for this event, and get out of the way.
Well, good afternoon. We're so glad you're all here. I'm Julie Clement, and I serve on the worship council here at Presbyterian Church of the Apostles. And we just wanted to welcome you, and I was asked just to tell you just a little bit about our church and why we chose to do this event south of the river. Our pastor, Gwin Pratt, was planning on doing that, and how many of you had that really fun virus where you coughed all the time and couldn't talk for like 3 weeks? That's what he's got right now. So he's really unhappy that he's not here. So we're hoping that you can send all your good vibes his way, and we can do this again sometime when he's better. First of all, our mission is we follow the ways of Jesus, practicing compassionate justice so that all may feel God in action. And our core values are basically, we welcome everyone here at Presbyterian Church of the Apostles. In fact, it was 20 years ago in January 1998 when we became a more light congregation. So we invite everyone here, regardless of skin color, ethnic origin, age, gender, marital status, sexual orientation, physical or mental ability, economic condition, or any particular element that makes us human. We honor your presence here today. We do justice. We work to transform our society to help the poor, the oppressed, and the least of these in our world. In fact, when we were formed 52 years ago, it was built on a mission of compassionate justice. So this event fits in really well with what our little church is all about. There is a flyer that I believe you received when you got your songbook, and it tells you about some of the things that we do or have participated in. Locally, we took part in the Brain Power and a Backpack event, which serves locally our Burnsville school district, and we helped to provide meals to 700 students over the weekend who don't have food over the weekend otherwise. You'll read more about the Immigrant Law Center in Minnesota. That's how we support things statewide. And that provides immigration legal assistance to low-income immigrants and refugees in Minnesota. And internationally, we've been involved in the Migrant Offshore Aid Station, where they send boats out into the Mediterranean and other bodies of water where migrants are trying to cross in unsafe boats. And since 2014, in just 4 years, they've rescued over 40,000 people. So there are members of our congregation here. Those of you who are members of PCA stand, so the guests here know who you are, and if they want to know more about our little church and the justice events that we're involved with, they can come and talk to you afterward. So thank you so much. And now I'd like to welcome Tesfa to the stage. Tesfa is my dear friend, and we got the idea to bring the Justice Choir here, and he was like all about it. And then all of a sudden it just morphed into this wonderful event with these drummers and everything else. So we're really thrilled to have you here, and now we get to sing.
I would love to welcome, I know we wanted to start the event off in a lively way. And when I think about growing up in Memphis, my mom is Black and my dad is Ethiopian. There's something special about rhythm. There's something special about the energy of drumming. And so I would love to have the Tiyumba African Drum and Dance Company actually kick off the event and set the tone for our afternoons. Can we welcome them and give them a round of applause? thank you, Tiyumba, African Dance, and Drumming. Wonderful, wonderful having you here. All right. So, of course, you start this off with, most events start off with the national anthem, right? So we're starting this event off with the Negro national anthem. So I'm going to ask that all of you stand up right now. And we're going to sing Lift Every Voice and Sing. Of the NAACP for many years. And when we sang that at church, he talked about the importance of us owning this piece of music and respecting this piece of music the exact same way that we respect the national anthem. And so the idea of standing up, that alone really brings that piece into focus and allows us to understand that the words when we say, sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope. I want you to listen to those harmonies right there. Can you play the piano part, sing a song, and slow it down? Listen to those harmonies with me. Now check this out. Now when you look at that and you say sing a song full of the hope, but notice that all of a sudden there's a harmonic shift. There's a twist. So we understand our past. We understand that the past was dark. 1619, first slave stepped foot on U.S. soil. 2019 is around the corner. And we're still having some of the same conversations. But I haven't lost hope. And I turn to the harmonies right here in this piece of music. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Can we sing this piece all the way to the end, but starting at sing a song full of the faith and process what's happening? I'm going to ask that you stand back up. Sing a song. Ready? Go. Sing a song full of the faith that the darkness has brought us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. when I look at the cards, we usually do some survey evaluation at the end of each one of these events. And I look at number 36, this piece of music, number 36. I want you to look at verse 2. Look at verse 2. It's the second song in your book. Yep, number 36 will be singing for justice. A friend on the left and a friend on the right. What's so interesting about this concept of justice is that it ain't about the left and right. Do I actually repeat myself? It ain't about the left and right. It has to be about humans. It has to be about people. And so when we sing this piece of music and you look at each other, I want you to take a few seconds. And actually, this is a hard thing to do. Look each other in the eyes as you sing this song. Like, look at this. I want you to turn to your neighbor right now. Say, neighbor. Neighbor. No, I don't believe y'all. I don't believe you just said that. Let's try it again. Say, neighbor. Neighbor. I see you. I see you. Say it again. Neighbor. Neighbor. I see you. I see you. All right. So as we sing this song, I want you to imagine that you got beer in your hand. I don't do beer that well. I'm about other stuff, but you know, beer is not my thing. But this is a total drinking song. Let every good person now join in our song. We sing for justice. I want you to think that you're inside of a bar singing for justice together, and y'all already had 3 or 4 beers. Deal? That's how much fun you need to have when we're singing this. Can we start it? Give us a little bit of an intro. This this entire Justice Choir model tested. Singing together is one thing, but actually being vulnerable with each other, trusting the person next to you, it's a scary thing. Like, I've never heard of people just all of a sudden breaking out in song in front of a group of strangers, unless they're crazy like me. But the way we have to process the fact that to open your mouth and make sounds next to a stranger is a very vulnerable thing. But hopefully we can take that moment and start conversations. And that's the idea of the Justice Choir, to sing together, but also have dialogue about these things. And one of the things that sticks out on this piece, we sing for our neighbors in faraway lands. So let's turn the page. That's the perfect transition into a bridge is stronger than a wall. The composer of this piece is actually from the Southeast Metro. Yes, that's really cool. Emily wanted to be here today, and she had a rehearsal. But I know that she's going to be tuning in somewhere to be able to watch this, so we have to make sure we do a good job for her. So, we're going to have a little bit of informal choir practice on this one, all right? Before we sing it. Everybody repeat after me. A bridge is stronger than a wall.
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 Oh, everyone.
Oh, everyone.
Is welcome here.
Is welcome here.
Our love is stronger than their fear.
Our love is stronger than their fear.
That's pretty much the idea. Now, when we get to the harmonies, I want to hear all four parts. If you're a tenor, you better sing that tenor part loud. I'm listening for y'all. Here we go. Let's take it from the top. Like, just go for it. Like, even if you just need to shout from the top again, here we go. First verse. If you had one move and a song, go! There we go. Fight hard, you fight a song. Into our first conversation. This is going to be our first talking point. So I would like to welcome the panel up to the stage and begin that dialogue. We need to have a very special welcome to our panel, and I want to introduce to you Pastor Bill Smith from Lily of the Valley, AME Church here in Apple Valley. He's a part of our panel today. And Dr. Nekima Levy-Pounds, who is a renowned civil rights attorney, ordained pastor, national expert on race. She led the NAACP. She's just a rock star. So let's welcome them up. Marsha Lewis from Presbyterian Church of the Apostles.
Everybody say amen. Amen.
start off with, just throw it out. When we talk about immigration reform in the United States, is there just a little bit of hidden racism in that conversation? Just maybe a little bit. Well, I want to unpack it. I think so. I want to just open it up to the panel. When you hear these calls, and I will say that they are not just coming from 45. They're coming from all over the place. There are a lot of people that really believe that we need tougher laws on our immigration. It is not just one person. I'm pretty sure when we take this entire area, when we take the metro area, all of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the surrounding counties, that there are a lot of people that we see every day that really believe we need immigration reform. And I'm not saying we do, we don't, but I want to open it up to the panel and get their thoughts on this. Nekima, would you start us off?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. It's awesome to see you all here who care about justice and here for justice. And thank you, Tesfa, for organizing this. I would say that there definitely is a lot of covert racism embedded within this conversation surrounding immigration reform. There's also, I think, maybe I have to turn on my TV. Sorry. There's also overt racism as well. And when you look at what's happening here, a lot of 45's focus has been on Muslim nations, right? So with his travel ban, 6 out of the 8 nations that have been restricted from being able to have people travel here are Muslim nations. And many of these people are black and brown individuals. And I think that there's an underlying animus towards people of color that plays a role in who gets to come, who gets to stay, and who is treated as a part of the American fabric, right? And so we're seeing a manifestation of a lot of hatred and vitriol come forward, but the reality is that some of the issues that we're talking about now have never fully been resolved. And I think if we are going to move towards immigration reform, we need intelligent immigration reform that takes into account how we treat people from darker nations versus European nations. And it also should take into account the fact that we're all here on stolen land. Right? Some of our ancestors came here voluntarily and some didn't. But we have to acknowledge that we owe a debt to our indigenous community because of the fact that their land has been stolen, they have never fully been repaid, nor have they been embraced the way that they should in our society. And so it's hypocritical now to turn around and say certain people can't come here, they don't belong here, especially when you think about this notion of what's happening with DACA and Dreamers. So Dreamers, for those who may not know, are children, they were children who immigrated here and basically became American citizens, if you will. But because of the way that we treat people who especially come from Mexico, folks are deciding that they're not worthy to participate in American society, even though they're tax-paying citizens. The overwhelming majority have jobs, they go to school, they contribute to the quality of American life. And they were not responsible as children for immigrating here. And so Congress had the opportunity to make a decision by March 5th. They did not do so, which meant the fate of Dreamers was in jeopardy, but thank God that the courts have stepped in and delayed that particular process. So at the end of the day, I do feel that racism is playing a role in what happens. I think that it's connected to our unreconciled racial history in America and how we see black and brown people as being inherently inferior. And that's built, you know, within the fabric of this country.
Y'all like that? Amen.
Don't be shy. I am, well, you all from PCA, you know who I am. And so I'm glad to be here once again. And does everybody here know what we're talking about when we're talking about 45? Those who know what 45 is or who 45 is, raise your hand. Okay, I just want to make sure that the language is clear, who and what 45 is. 45 can be found at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue as the residence. Sometimes, so at the golf course, sometimes near Lionel is a very famous place for it. But I want to say that that racism is such an important part of the history of our country. And it's the racism that we have is an economic construct. It has been designed in order to define who gets and who does not get. It's designed to define who works with their hands and with the sweat of their brow, and who gets to determine how the money is going to flow. And it is tied up so much into the history of our country. We don't know how much the Chinese were involved in building our railroads across the country. And then oftentimes, rather than paying them, they were simply killed when the barons got done with them. And the situation with Irish people, I don't know if you know, but I'm 13% Irish. And that's all right, that's all right. I don't know if it was him or not, but my great-great-great-grandmother, who was African, and her husband, who was white, I don't know if he was the Irishman or not, but when they got married, he was required to go on a monthly basis to the county seat and sign a document that said he was black. He had to step down from his position of white privilege because he had married a black woman. And that determined where he could go and where they could go and what they could do and what they could not do. Nonetheless, my ancestors, by the way, I'm 31% Nigerian. Somebody roll a drum for me. So you understand, you know, who's running the show when you're in my blood veins. And there's another, I don't know, 40-some-odd% that they don't know what I am, so I don't know. Thank God for ancestry DNA. But racism is such a divisive issue. And for those of us who are mixed heritage, and many of us are, even those of us who have quote-unquote white skin, have mixed heritage. Who do you hate? Who do you love? When I first saw a picture of my great-great-great-grandfather, and he looked just like my grandmother, who I love dearly. I never met him, but my grandmother I knew. The two of them looked so much alike, and he was a white man. There's no two ways about it. It wasn't until that time, maybe about 20 years ago, that I came to the realization that I got a little bit of everybody in me. And that with this everybody that's in me, I'm judged because I'm not totally white. I show up. Of course, now things are changing. Now that you can get a $5 tan, they spray it on you. But I saw the advertisement last night. I was amazed that people would do that. But many people who have white skin, part of the time, are darker than me. But nonetheless, I am judged because, well, I just got a haircut, so you can't see it that well. But I have nappy hair, you know, I have black features, and people on my job judge me because of my skin color. It has been an economic barrier in the place where I work with the city of Minneapolis. I don't mind telling anybody that if you are black, you are not going to go as far as if you are white. There are many jobs there that if you're a friend of somebody or a family member of somebody, which, you know, they will deny that that goes on, but because of their white skin, they're on an express track up to the top. And if you do not have white skin, many times your application won't even be processed. You don't even get a chance to compete.
So I want to jump in for a second. I want to make that transfer in this dialogue that you're having about racism within and being economic, can we bring that conversation back to immigration? So do you think that there's some economic ideas and principles that's leading to this new discussion of immigration reform? Because when you think, I've been hearing from people down south that a lot of the farms and stuff are now empty because they can't find people to work these farms that they're now saying, get out of here. And so how do you feel about that? Do you feel like that there's some kind of economic piece tied to this conversation?
I think that it's tied with cheap labor. I think that it's tied with the direction that the country is headed in terms of, are we going to be an agricultural, there's a lot of the immigration that's tied to agricultural labor, but when it comes to, if it comes to labor in the steel mills, let's just say that, because that's been a recent focus. A lot of times, the steel mills are filled with laborers who are extremely high paid. You won't find as many people of color in those jobs. People who have color other than white in their skin are found out on the farms, are found in the lowest paying jobs that are in this country. Jobs that many times, and I'm sure that you're aware that they say white folks don't want those jobs. Well, why should you if you can get the jobs that are on top? I think there's a rebalancing going on, a rebalancing that's going to determine how many white people are going to stay on top, and you can't have too many of people of color coming in and eroding that foundation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to tie in Marsha for a second. So when you hear this and you hear white people, white people, white people, and when we look out here, we also see a lot of white people. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, when you are in your circles, like, do you find yourself uncomfortable hearing some of these conversations? When you're listening to this, how does that make you feel?
Well, first of all, Gwin asked me to take his place on this panel,
Yeah.
and I said those are awfully big shoes to fill. But you can't say no to Gwin. It makes me sick. It makes me uncomfortable because it makes me ill. Because I grew up with white privilege and I didn't know it. I didn't know, because I've never been stopped while driving. I didn't know that other people get stopped all the time because of their color of their skin. I didn't know. I didn't know I got the job that I got because I'm white. I didn't know that people with darker skin color don't necessarily get the job, or they have the wrong name, they don't even pass the application process. That's what makes me sick, is that I didn't know. And our history books didn't tell us. My college education didn't inform me. It's only in the past few years that I've heard about white privilege, and it makes me ill. And the circles that I walk in, we all feel the same way, and we are more than willing to vote and march and do the things that need to be done to make it equal here. I do think immigration is an economic issue, but it's also fear. Fear works, and people are afraid. We need to be looking at what this country actually needs, which is more young people, and those people are often people of color. We need their energy, we need their excitement, we need their hard work, their enthusiasm, and their wonderful creativity in order to make this country move forward.
Thank you for sharing that too. Thank you. When we make a transfer from that dialogue, when we look at that piece, she brought up a word. She said she believes it's fear. It's fear-driven. And in A Bridge is Stronger Than a Wall, there's a line that says, our love is stronger than their fear. You all have to be a part of the solution. It's not about skin color. It's not about friends on the left, friends on the right. But when we unpack that fear and realize we all breathe the same. what it's about. So I want you to think about this conversation that you just heard, these three beautiful speakers just shared there. And I want to sing that song again. I want you to make a transfer from that dialogue to the words that you're singing. Let's take a really strong down the ball. You can walk, you can a song. If you fight on, you fight a song. Oh, everyone is welcome here. Our love is stronger than when they go low, we will stand tall. Like David, we stand for all. Oh, everyone is welcome here. Our love is stronger. Awesome, awesome. I would love to invite the Tiyumba Dance and Drumming Company back and to share another number with us. Thank you, panel. You can move back to your seat. Absolutely. we've been talking about, this idea of us working together in unity after justice, we have to go back to the civil rights era. And we look at the song in our book, everybody, number 9, hold on, keep your eyes on the prize. When we sing this, I mean, obviously, we've heard this before. Hold on, keep your eyes on the prize, hold on. And it's a haunting melody. But there's so much hope in this. There's so much joy when you get to that whole note. Hold on, and energy and direction as we sing. So I'm going to ask you to use your outdoor voices. You can't sing this very, it can't be, oh, the one thing we did right. No, that ain't gonna fly. There needs to be a visceral call in your sound. Oh, the one thing we did right was the day we started to fight. There has to be body and energy in that sound. Can y'all find that sound? Yes. Can y'all find that sound? Yes. Let's try it from the top. Skip around just a little bit. And I want us to move to number 28. Take a stand. She talked about, Marsha, thank you so much for sharing. You talked about your privilege. You talked about, you're sick that you didn't know what you didn't know. We all have a platform. Many of us have privilege. Some of us have power. For a change to truly happen, we have to be willing to risk our privilege, our platform, and our power. If we're not willing to put that on the line, nothing will change. And so as we look at this next song, you look at the words of the next song before we sing it. We will stand and fight until the day is won. We will take a stand. The word that sticks out to me, the word we. Not they. When I think about us working together after this goal, these communities, when we talk about our immigrant communities, when we talk about our communities of color, I don't want you to feel as a white person that, you need to be the white savior. That's not what it's about. But it is about you using that privilege and platform and power to take a stand and stand beside our communities of color.
Yes. Amen.
Not stand in front, stand beside them and listen. Don't offer, listen. Allow that conversation conversation to come from a place of humility, a place of acceptance, and saying, you know what, I accept the fact that I'm in a position of privilege and power, and I'm going to do what's necessary to take a stand and be with you as my brother or sister. So let's take this from the top, and then I'm going to invite our panel back up to discuss. Giving us 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I want to make sure that we get everybody out of here by 5:15 like we promised. No? 5:30? Okay, let's do 5. Here we go then. So, Marsha brought up privilege and power. So I want to start with Nekima, and I want you to give us steps and guidance on how we as an audience can use our privilege, power, and platform to take a stand for those people in need.
Well, I would say that one thing that Marsha talked about is the fact that she just recently discovered that she has white privilege. So I think the first step is actual awareness of the privilege that white people hold in this society. And it can be difficult for people who think that they're liberal or who think that they're progressive to acknowledge that they operate in white privilege and that they practice white supremacy. And so when I'm talking to people, I say, number one, acknowledge your privilege, begin to understand it. Don't operate in a spirit of guilt or shame, and don't stay locked in tension and discomfort. Because if you do, you will never grow into the person that you can become. Like the songs that we're singing where we're saying, we love each other, we'll take a stand for each other, we won't be silent. The only way that we can get there is if people are willing to do the difficult internal work of grappling with their own privilege. So that means looking around your neighborhood and asking the question of, why is everyone white in my neighborhood? When you go to your children's schools or your grandchildren's schools, why are the overwhelming majority of children white? And to take it a step further, why are their teachers white? Right? And if we really want to get to the next level, we go into our workplaces. Why are the overwhelming majority of my coworkers white? And all of my supervisors? And if you went to college, your classmates, your professors, it's shocking when you actually look at the world through a racial justice lens and we realize that every day we're operating in an inequitable environment. And that's the way that this country is built. This country is also built upon the lies that we have been told. When you look at the history books and we learn about Thanksgiving, for example, most of us celebrate Thanksgiving. But recently we've had indigenous people speaking out and saying, that's not the truth of what happened on Thanksgiving. You're actually helping to celebrate some tragic circumstances that happened to our people. And where white people are being placed on a pedestal as if they did something positive for natives, but they didn't. And so we have to get to the point where we're willing to revisit history. I would recommend looking at a book called A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. That helped me to go back and deconstruct the lies that I had been told in school and to see history from a completely different lens. One that showed the truth of who was oppressing people, who was being oppressed, but I would say even more importantly, the resilience of the people who fought back and took a stand. So those are some of the things that I think need to happen. Beyond that, we need to challenge dominant narratives that put people of color in a subordinate position. If you see school articles about education, and most of the time it's a white teacher standing in a classroom with all kids of color, and it is perpetuating this narrative of the white savior, question why did they choose that classroom? And what is being portrayed through that photograph and the underlying story? It's usually a story that is disempowering to people of color and one that reinforces negative stereotypes. We need to challenge those things. We need to speak up and use our voices. And as you were saying, Tesfa, be willing to take risks. Be willing to take risks. Be willing to lose some friends from using your voices. If we're not willing to do that, then we're not serious. So I hope that more people will use your voices, your privilege, and your power to fight back against the status quo. That's how we'll begin to change things.
Because she sounded up.
She did a good job. We talk about the lies that we've been told in our history, and one of the things that occurs to me is that the lies persist today. It was only a couple of years ago that, again, working with the city of Minneapolis, we had a program where we were told we must bring in interns, and through the Step Up program. And they didn't ask us how many we needed. They said, you must bring them in, and they gave us a number. I think it was someplace around 100 and some that we had to bring in, which we did. Many times we didn't have enough work for them because they were high school students. And they sent, the top management sent a photographer around with the express purpose, written in emails, to take pictures of all of the brown-skinned people. And they put them into a catalog and advertised how the city of Minneapolis was being so diverse, knowing full well that these interns were there for 2 months and they would be gone. I was one who refused to allow my picture to be taken. They threatened me. I said, okay, fine. You know what you're doing. My boss, who was white, is white, He fought against it. He told our entire division that this is racism and that we should not participate. But he also was under the hammer. This was only a couple of years ago.
And so I want to jump in for a second. So if we as a society are not willing to take that risk and say, all right, I got this comfortable home in the Southeast Metro, about 3,000 square feet, and somebody says to you something that is clearly racist, something that you just, without a doubt, disagree with, but you aren't willing to risk, even for a moment, that 3,000 square foot home that you got because of your privilege, it becomes a tricky conversation. It's like, to bring back what Nekima brought up, she said, we're not serious about it if we're not willing to take that risk and use our privilege, our power, and our platform to take a stand. And so I want to bring that back into Marsha for a second. Obviously, this is a difficult conversation. What would you offer to the room and say ways that you think we can be better at taking a stand? We being this entire Southeast Metro.
One of the things that's happened in the south suburbs is that we have quite a large African immigrant community here. We have a school next door to our church that is probably 50% minority in the school, maybe even more. We have partnered with that school, volunteers from this congregation that are going in, listening to children read, helping with the library and other events in the church, in the school. We are building relationships, and I think that is critical to changing the narrative. We are not only assisting those children in becoming better students, which children of color are disadvantaged in our schools, and that's a terrible thing. So we're helping them in that, but we are also building relationships with the immigrant community, and I think that's critical for immigrants or people of color to move outside of kind of the enclaves that they're living in, to integrate the neighborhoods. So that's a start.
Okay.
So I just have a couple of questions for Marsha. Thank you for that illustration. I would ask, at the school where you all are volunteering, how many of the teachers are people of color, or who reflect the population of the students of color who are there?
I don't know for sure. I would guess very few, but there are a number of, they have, I don't even know, a student liaison person who is of color, and they have a number of aides that are working in the building that are also of color. So it's a start.
So what Marsha just described is a Jim Crow system working within the public school system. Notice that the overwhelming majority of teachers, probably well over 90%, we know in Minnesota 94% of the teachers are white, right? So in that building, you maybe have one or two, if that. I'd be shocked if it's that many, who are teachers, right? Think about the role of a teacher. Think about if a teacher belongs to a union, some of the protections that exist. That's a salary position. It could become a lifetime appointment with benefits and some form of job protection. If you are an aide working in that building, you could be fired at the drop of a dime. You cannot use your voice in that environment, even if you say, well, my role is to work with the students of color, this is what's happening to them. I don't know how many aides have been fired as a result of speaking out against the disparate treatment of students of color. Not to mention, many of these schools, particularly in suburban areas, but also in the city, hire behavioral interventionists. Most of them are black, right? The overwhelming majority are black men. And when you go into a school and see that, the two populations of black men are usually the behavioral interventionists and the janitors. And when I look at that, what I see is Jim Crow. right? An inequitable system that's being reinforced at every layer and every level that most of us have been taught to accept, but it is not acceptable. My own children experienced some of these issues when they went to public school, where for the first time, just about all of their teachers were white, and even though they came from a middle-class household, they were made to feel as if they were intellectually inferior and not as capable. And part of that has to do with what we've been conditioned to believe, that there is an achievement gap, and it is the fault of the children. They're not capable of learning at the rate of white children. But you look at who teaches them, you look at the curriculum, you look at some of the activities and the resource allocations, and it's very understandable why some of these disparities persist. Not to mention some of the anti-Black sentimentality that sometimes happens within the public school system. People don't want to deal with that, but it is a very real issue, where some schools do not like the new diversity that is happening in their schools. Some parents don't like it, and they withdraw their children because they feel that resources are being used up to address issues that are facing populations of color. So I'm throwing that out just to show as one clear example of what is really happening when we dig beneath the surface and we start asking critical questions about why this system functions the way that it does, and then taking it a step further and saying, what are the implications? What's going to happen to these children if they're not seeing people who look like them reflected in the classroom? Are they going to be able to go on to college and feel that they were educated, number one, period, in terms of being ready for life, but number two, about who they are and what they can contribute to the world? So those are things that I think we got to think about if we're going to change.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to add to that. The fact that we have those systems operating in the school system, it goes even further. Dakota County has one of the highest rates of people of color, children of color, being referred to the juvenile justice system. And it is specific, and we've been dealing with this for several years now. And the biggest problem is that there are two different ways of dealing. There are two different feelings when children act out. If a white child has a fit and shoves a chair to one side and slams the door, they're referred to someone who will talk with them, a counselor or whatever. If a black child or a person of color does that, they call the school resource officer. The school resource officer then has to deal with that child, and usually what happens is they call the police, because the teacher doesn't want them back because they're afraid of them. They don't know what to do with them. So they send them to the police department, who doesn't know what to do with them, so they charge them with disorderly conduct. Disorderly conduct is one of the worst charges you can get, simply because there's no diversion for it. There's nothing, it's a charge on your record. When you start talking about how do we get people of color into our communities, that's a very good question, because once they've got charges, and those charges stay on their record, they can't get many different things, jobs, housing, loans, all because they have a charge. And when you do a background check on somebody like that, especially if it's a young black male or a young person of color who's a male, they are simply dead in the water, and that sticks with them. The difficult part is, for me, I've been dealing with this for so many different years in Dakota County and Hennepin County, and my wife has been the word is slipping my mind. She's been dealing with juvenile justice for 30 some odd years. There are so many of people of color who are trying to reach for justice who have simply run out of steam because there's no change happening. Because the things that we were fighting for 30 years ago are the same things that we're fighting for right now, and we're running out of gas. And without white folks to help, literally without white folks to help, I happen to have what I call light privilege. I am a light-skinned African-American. And because of that, I can go places and talk to people because they're not as afraid of me. They still know I'm not white. But if a dark-skinned person walks in. Now that fear factor heightens because they don't know you and you don't look at all like them. But because I don't talk in a way, I mean, all the time I'm talking to people on the phone, and when they see me, oh, I didn't know you were black. I'm like, well, what did you expect? But I'm educated, I have my doctorate, I have a history of dealing with in the Jewish community, and so I'm used to being in those kind of circles, but I use that to help my brothers and sisters who are people of color, who otherwise wouldn't even have the audience that I have. And because of that, I am targeted, because I'm working for the wrong cause. I've been asked several times by upper management, whose team are you on? In other words, I'm liable to suffer for raising up the fact that you have thrown out 4 or 5 people of color from the application process, or you have taken a high number of people of color and thrown them into the juvenile justice system. All of a sudden, I'm a threat, and it's as if you can enjoy your light privilege as long as you know whose team you're on. Because if you're going to work for people of color, your light privilege is all of a sudden a threat. It will get revoked. Absolutely. I lose my license to talk to white folks.
So I think that's the perfect way for us to transition back into singing. I know we're pushing a little bit late, so I want to go ahead and push ahead. And I want to can we thank our panel? So I would love for us to continue on and singing this one here, Oh, I Woke Up This Morning. Now, it says leader. I think we're all leaders in here. We all are going to be leading together. So I want y'all to sing this leader part with me. So can you give us an A? Can you sing it with me? 1, 2. Oh, I woke up this morning with my mind. Let me hear it again. Let's hear it again. Let's hear it. Big, loud, strong. 1, 2. Let's try it again. Strong. That was outdoor voices. 1, 2. Oh, I woke up this morning with my mind. Now we're talking. Now we're talking. So, let's go. Woke up this morning with my mind. Let's go. State of justice. Woke up this morning with my mind. This last piece, and in that piece, instead of a tempo marking, it says determined. I love, when I first saw that, my co-founder of the Justice Choir movement, Abby Batinas, is back here in the back. And we sat down, and we sat down for, oh God, what did you say, 100 hours or something? Going through and trying to weed down from 120 something songs into 40, a little over 40. And you look at this and you see some songs that have a quarter note equals 84, you can see a half note equals 80, spirited at 84. But then you look at this song and it says, determined. As we walk and sing and wake up in the morning, we cannot lose that determination. We have to keep that focus, we have to keep that drive. You know, when I think about something that Pastor Bill said, he said, some of us have run out of fuel. We no longer have the energy to fight. And we need the white folks to stand with us and use that determination to fight for all. And so as we do that, one of the questions I'm going to bring back to the panel in a second is, what laws and systems are in place, and how can we use our democracy to find those changes? So this one here is a pretty straightforward song, but I want to try something out. Everybody say one. One. Now say one. One. Now say one. One. Two. Two. Three. Three. Four. Four. Show me what democracy looks like. Show me what democracy looks like. Y'all can do it better. Show me what democracy looks like. Show me what democracy looks like. Now, I felt determination that time. So, can we sing this from the top? The systems in place. We talk about the criminalization of our people of color. I want to turn the floor over to Nekima. Nekima, you are a gifted speaker, all of the above. But as an attorney, what laws and systemic barriers are in place that need to be discussed in our state, in our cities?
You got 2 minutes.
All right, let me whittle down American history. 2 minutes. I think that one of the most pressing issues that we face in our society is the issue of mass incarceration. We have the highest rate of incarceration in the world, with roughly 1 in 100 people being incarcerated. One of the things that I think is important is to understand that mass incarceration has its roots in slavery, especially when it comes to the criminalization of people of color. So you look at the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which was enacted in 1865. Think about the language. It was supposed to abolish slavery. It said neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall be allowed, except if one has been duly convicted of a crime. Now, if Congress was serious about abolishing the brutal, inhumane system of slavery, it would have just said, we will never, ever allow slavery or involuntary servitude to happen again. Instead, they opened the door to a new form of slavery through the criminal justice system. So what we had happen was that many southern states changed their laws on the books to make standard behavior by black men a crime. So you saw newly freed slaves suddenly become criminals inside of the justice system. They made things like talking too loud a crime, hanging out late at night, being unemployed, spitting on the sidewalk. Those things were crimes. And we look at many of our laws on the books across southern states and even here in Minnesota, they mirror those laws that were put in place in the aftermath of slavery. So in 2015, many of us in Minneapolis band together and we fought against two oppressive laws, one against spitting and one against lurking. My law students did this research when I was a law professor at St. Thomas. They found that the spitting law was put in place in the 1800s as a result of a tuberculosis scare in Minneapolis. It was thought you could transfer tuberculosis through spitting. The medical evidence proved that that was not the case, but that law remained on the books, and it was being used by police as a pretext to primarily stop and frisk young African-American men, ask them for their identification, give them citations. Sometimes they'd be handcuffed, arrested. City Council that those laws needed to be changed. They thought as a matter of public policy, we need these types of laws on the books. And we argued as a matter of public policy, these laws need to come off the books immediately. And not just these two laws, there's still others on the books in Minneapolis, across the metro area and across the state that are criminalizing people who are not engaged in criminal activity. So I think that that is the #1 issue that we can focus on in the state of Minnesota, because of the impacts, as Pastor Bill was talking about, to people who have criminal histories. It's like wearing a scarlet letter on your chest when you have a criminal history. You go to apply for a job, you go to apply for housing, you're essentially being locked out of society and blackballed, and it's unacceptable. And also think about the connection to the proliferation of mass incarceration, more prisons, more money being spent on our federal and state prison budgets. That means less money for education, employment programs, parks, and the things that many of us enjoy. This is all happening on our watch, and we're sitting back and we're not doing enough to combat these issues. So I would love to see a movement for people who care about justice being vigilant and beginning to tackle these unjust laws and stand up for people who are marginalized, criminalized, and excluded from our society.
Pastor Bill, what would you like to add to this conversation?
Pardon me?
I said, when you think about that 13th Amendment that Nekima just talked about, what do you think that we can do as a community to really go out there and use our democracy and use that platform of privilege? What are the next steps for you? What do you envision?
You know, one of the things that I worry about the most is that the laws that are in place and the systems that are in place, in order to be changed, they have to be changed by people who hold the keys. And oftentimes those people are not people of color. And they are people who are entrenched in a system as it exists. The prison system makes money off of prisoners, to the point that prisons are being built in order that they've got more capacity so that they can draw in more money. It's not so much about protecting us from the prisoners, okay? Even not so much about what they have been accused of doing wrong. But one of the things that scares me the most right now is the number of pastors, white pastors, and people who are white people on my job, who have accidentally found out how racist people in their families were and their friends were. And with a lot of the different things that have come out in the last year, people have felt so much more comfortable with showing their true selves. And I have become afraid of, are the people who I thought my friends are white? Are they really my friends? Are they living one life when they see me face to face and another life when they're away from me? Those people are the ones that I am most afraid of. I think Martin Luther King said, I can't quote it exactly, but it's not so much the white folks who are against me that I'm afraid of, because I can deal with that. It's the white friends that I have who will not speak out, who are silent, even though they know what's going on. Because I don't know what's going on in your household or with your families or in the circles that you run in. But when you see it, do you deal with it? Do you speak out against it? To the risk of your own family relationships, to the risk of your own employment sometimes? And that's what it's going to take. A lot of times the laws that are in place, as Nekima has said, need to be changed. Or, I should say, or properly interpreted and enforced. And uniformly enforced. You see, some of the laws that are enforced against people of color are all right as long as they're against people of color. But once they start getting enforced, you find a bunch of white folks that get arrested for spitting, or jaywalking, or beat up because they didn't cross the street at the right place at the right time. That law's gonna get changed. Okay? When it affects the white community, all of a sudden it is heightened. It is the issue of injustice becomes front and center. Or when your child marries a person of color and you have grandchildren who are people of color, and all of a sudden you find your family members being mistreated, and you're looking and thinking, wait, I never saw that before. You know, I have friends now who have people of color that they're married to, or who they, have adopted children. They're looked at differently now when they go into a restaurant. They walk into a department store and their young children are being monitored, where it never happened before, and they never saw it before. And the quandary is, what do I say about it? Will I stand up for what is just and make sure that I follow through? And will I make sure that I don't run out of steam? One of the most difficult things I'm dealing with right now, I almost got retired. I almost got retired. And I had been fighting about the fact that there were no people of color in upper management. And as a matter of fact, I was investigated for having a conversation where I said all of upper management is white males. That's all I said. And I was called in for an investigation to see what did I say. I told them, this is what I said. And I said, what did I do wrong? I said, look around. All I did was say what it is. But all of a sudden, it was a threat. And after I kept holding their feet to the fire, and they knew I was going to retire, they made me part of upper management. They know I'm not going to last long because I'm out of steam. And it's almost, you know, it's one of those situations where I'm looking at it and I'm saying, is that just? If they had made me a person who had some authority when I had the strength to make a difference, that to me would have been justice.
Not to mention the economic aspect of all the wages that you lost that you deserved, that you didn't receive because of the color of your skin and systemic racism in that environment.
Absolutely. You know, I did get the money because I had to work about 4 jobs. But that contributed to me almost being dead right now. You know, and I don't have a problem with There are some good friends that I have who are white, who are offended by the term white privilege because they came from a farm community where they worked hard all of their life and they believe they deserve what they've got and they deserve to be first in line, as opposed to people of color who just got here, or in their mind, people of color who don't deserve it because they're not as entrenched in the American community. And I feel for those people because they did work hard. But I don't have an answer for that, other than to say, don't be afraid of people of color, because now they're standing side by side with you in the line for jobs, in the line for employment and housing. Many of you don't know how far back, it was only during the 60s, that a good portion of Southeast and Southwest Minneapolis had clauses in there that said you could not sell to people of color. You could only sell to white people. So now we go into Linden Hills, we go into Kenwood, we go into the Armitage neighborhoods, and of course they're all white. They have a history of being all white because it was mandated that they had to be all white. Why is the North Side black? The North Side black is because they could only buy when the Jewish people were run out of North Minneapolis, and that's the only place a black person could buy.
And look at the disinvestment, which is where we live.
It's tough. It's tough. These are systemic problems that are going to require a unified stand being taken by people who hold the keys. People who can make the difference. Okay? I can only do so much. And I do want to retire. Doggone it, I want to get
If I would like to say, I know we're over time, and I appreciate your patience in being here. But if you are one of those key holders, risk your privilege, risk your power, risk your platform. I haven't lost hope. I honestly believe we will overcome. It will take those people with those keys to make it happen. I'd love for us to stand and close with "We Shall Overcome." And after we end, we will have another performance from the Tiyumba Dance and Drumming Company. And we have a reception, cookies, over in the fellowship hall afterwards. So if you have some time, that would be great. I would love to take a few moments. If you would like to share with me, I would love to hear your stories and gather information. So I'll be around for a little bit to talk with people and just to get a chance to build some community. So let's sing "We Shall Overcome," and when you look at the bottom, what systemic issues need to be addressed? Those systemic issues come and can be solved by people with the keys. We shall today, and I would love for us to please be seated as we enjoy one more performance from the Sayibu.
Oh, sorry. Just one last thing. So Marsha just said, what are some concrete steps that we can take? I can give you one action that you can take right now. You go to Facebook and go to Justice for Natalie, for those who are on Facebook. There's an African-American woman named Natalie Pollard who is being charged and could face up to 20 years in prison. She was a victim of domestic violence, and she was several months pregnant, and she stabbed her abuser in a scuffle, and he died as a result of that. She had called the police on him 3 times over a 6-month period. He had broken into her house on the night that this happened. They charged her in Ramsey County the first time, and she was sentenced to 10 years in prison, found guilty by an all-white jury, got off on a technicality after spending 28 months in prison and jail, and now they're retrying her. So her trial starts on March 19th, and so we're asking people to get involved by calling John Choi, the Ramsey County Attorney's Office, and asking him to not pursue prosecution of this woman who was a bona fide victim of domestic abuse, and who was a mother of 6 children who had to give birth to her child while incarcerated. So sign up, Justice for Natalie. Show up if you can during the trial. Call John Choi's office. That is a concrete action to save this woman's life from going to prison, and also her children from losing their mother. Thank you.
Can we do a great job of thanking our panel today? I'd also like to thank our accompanist, Joe Trucano. Appreciate you being out there. I would love to turn it over to Tiyumba.
ethnic dance.
Oh,
And join us.
everybody, y'all game? Let's go ahead and dance to it.
Okay, very simple dance movement. Please come join us or stay where you are. But if you can come and join us, that will be great.
They go for it, yeah.